Legacy fonts in Linux from the fntcol16 collection. You'll need to acquire the font. Currently available here, and probably other mirrors of the original site. The original site doesn't seem to have it anymore. So you acquire the font. A few starter points, at least for Debian. You want to have, let's click this first, a font server to make the fonts available. You don't need it for every font, but you may or may not need it for this font. Better safe than sorry. You'll likely need to reconfigure from the defaults. You want to be auto and auto. And when it says bitmap fonts, you want yes, because that is what we are dealing in, bitmap fonts. Alright, now we have our fntcol16. Dates back to 1994 for the zip file. A lot of these fonts existed in the 80s. So we need to extract these fonts. Use 7-zip extract. And bam. One little quirk with the fonts as they exist in their native state. This font here is really an F10 font, even though it's named F08. You can tell that from the file size. And back in the old days, monitors were dedicated devices to the computer. They were not TVs, the rare exception. And in those days, there were roughly 2 horizontal pixels for 1 vertical pixel. So you'll likely need to scale these twice as tall to make them look like they did back in the day, or as close to it as you can on modern gear. So we're running the script. Written in bash, use a few bash extras. And then we've got to choose a font. Let's do the F14 version of Macintosh. To add an Apple IIe or other Mac Classic or whatever those things were back in those days, you might recognize. F14 is the name, so it's really an 8 by 14 pixel font. For video purposes, you want to scale it, because 3 pixels at 1920 by 1080 is 1 pixel at 640 by 360. 1080p versus 360p. So I'm going to do multiplier of 3 on the horizontal and multiplier of 6 on the vertical, which is the maximum things are hard-coded in the script. By no means a perfect script, but a functional script. And it's going to output the standard out, so we want to redirect that to a file. And it outputs a PDF format file, which is an Adobe font format. It's good enough to work in xterm. It might be useful for other purposes, but it could most likely be improved. There are a few utilities to do that. And it finished. We'll likely need to edit this. Since we're doing special scaling, we might want to rename part of the name to keep it unique, so we can do other scalings and not have them get confused with each other. And the way Debian's configured is there's a folder which you might need to create, but it saves you a few extra steps that you would otherwise have to do. Every time you change your fonts in the folder, you will need to do a few things. Namely that and that. And every time you start X, you need to do a few things. You do not need to do the user root. And there are some extra steps you could do to make it permanent, although I forgot what those were. So I just do this each time. I've got it scripted, so I just run a script when I start X and I'm good. And once it's there, you'll have a face name. Here's the face name of the font. And there's an other name. Apparently I have a few others out here. But mostly this is our font. Where is it? Here we do the 14. So 84 is the pixel height, which we need to remember. We can use that in things like xclock. That'll start up in the top left corner. And that's xclock. So you can have a clock. The LCD font is quite compelling for this purpose. And you can also use xterm. There's a padding which you want to override if you want to have it full screen like I currently got it. That way it lines up perfectly with the video needs. So we override that. The default geometry is 80 by 25 or 80 by 24, which is too big for our massive font. And then we want to offset at the top left again. And then we use the name. And we can use wildcards on parts of the name. And that's the font in use. Blast from the past. And that's basically it on how you have, get, and use legacy fonts.